All right, welcome back to another Bothsides Podcast. Today, we are very fortunate to sit in the house of $180 million man, Frank Greef, who sold their business to Domain, who out of that share walked away with 25 million.
Oof, there we go, straight into it. I like it.
Straight into it. Mate, the first question that comes to mind is, what do you do with 25 million? What are you spending it on?
That's good. So my context is I had zero assets. I was an asset on paper, had no concept of what the valuation was worth. So my first thing was, I've been
Lambo Urus?
My first thing was, hey, darling wife, you've been with me since 16. We finally can buy ourselves a place. We've been renting an apartment. Our son was born in the apartment. So that was the first thing, was like, get the dream home and then we'll figure out the rest later. And then a sweet holiday.
Where was the sweet holiday? Because we were sitting in the sweet house facing Cocoa Beach. So where was the sweet holiday?
Fuck, this sounds like a flex. Fuck it, let's do it. I got invited. So I won an award. I got invited to Necker Island, so Richard Branson's island. Yep. And so that's I spent a week there and surrounded myself with other people like that were just, I was a small fish in a very big pond, and I fucking loved it. That was sick. That was like my first one. That was a boys trip too, so hello.
That would be wild.
Well, mate, today for me, I think what would be phenomenal is I've heard a lot of podcasts with you already explaining the journey to 180 million, but what I'd love to unpack is the new journey you're about to embark, which is to achieve $1 billion valuation over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
The first question I had for you offline was, why $1 billion? Why not 10 billion? Do you want to unpack a bit about what you're looking to achieve and why you set that as the goal?
For sure. So I'm going to start with why I set it as a goal. Just for everybody listening, I am definitely commercial. Reality is business is you need to make money and be profitable to be able to have the doors open. So it's not like got to make money because then I'm happy or not happy. But it's like, but business, like the happiness is dictated kind of by, are you open? Because once you stay open, we can solve all those other things to make sure the culture's right, et cetera, et cetera. But I always start with a monetary goal in my mind. So it's not like that's the thing I'm going to splash over all the websites, but I start with there in the goal in my mind because it's got to be big, audacious, scary, and be like enough of a leap that I'm like, whoa, like there's a lot of challenges that come with that. And then once I go there, I go, okay, now I can work backwards. So to your point, like why not 10 bill? Firstly, love that. Now we're talking. I think there's a lot of lessons that get learned from going from 0 to 1 million. So that took us 4 years to get there for the first time, right? 4 years to get to 1 million. And the lessons from 1 to 10, there's a lot, and so on and so forth. So I've learned the lesson from like an enterprise value of 180 mil. I think the gap between that and $1 billion, there's lots to learn. And between that and 10 bill, it's like, well, I don't yet even have the right in my mind to play there because I haven't learned the lessons required to get to the 1. Now, that doesn't mean you get there and then you go, cool, sell, eject, like, let's go again. It's more just like stay where I can and where I know, okay, the gap is wide enough and scary enough, but I still think I can do it.
One thing that sparks to mind is you talk about the skills to get from 180 to $1 billion. How are you acquiring those skills? Are you learning them on the fly through being in business, or are you picking up the phone, flying to Necker Island and saying, Richard Branson, mate, this is the plan. What do I need to do here? And how do you develop that for any entrepreneur listening?
So it's very different to the early days of business than it is to now. So early days of business, 20 years old when I started. So I didn't have anybody on the phone. Like Richard would be like, Richard the plumber, my mate. You know what I mean? Like that. And it's like, how do I get to billion? He's like, well, I thought you said there's a tap leaking. Like, slow down, champ. So those early days for me is like the beautiful world that we all get to kind of live in is like content is abundant. The information that is required to know to do a lot of these things is everywhere. And so you just need to focus on what are the things that I believe I'm missing and I can learn and absorb from. But everybody's heard that. That's boring, right? So now, like, what is it today? I am super fixated on the concept of like leverage time. So for me right now, it's like, in order to get to the billion, and why 5 years is because it's like, okay, it's got to be really, really quick. So I got to like, okay, for $1 billion enterprise value, you got to be doing 100 million revenue, roughly 10x multiple. I go, okay, to do that, how many users would you need to have using the product? Like how many team members do you need to have? Like where would you need to be based? And by identifying those gaps, I can then identify the knowledge gaps. So for example, to do that in Australia, kind of hard / I don't think 5 years is possible. So I go, okay, in order to do that, I have to crack the US market. Okay, I have my first data point. The first thing I can learn from, the first deficient knowledge gap that I have to focus on. So now I got to go, okay, who is it that has done the Australian to US gap from a technology perspective? Those are the people I now really get closer into my network. You know, I've recently I did a trip to US and I started to talk to people that have done, you know, a $500 million sale, $1 billion sale, a VC with $1 billion under management. I'm like, okay, I now need to know, I need to talk to those people to figure out who in their network has done it, who can I learn from? So I come back to this concept of leverage of time because like, now, if I go and try and Google those answers, I'll be there forever. But to pick up the phone and make that conversation, ask those pointed questions, it's far quicker and simpler to do so. Does that make sense? Anything else you need me on that one?
Keep it collaborating. So leverage your time.
Yep.
You picked America as the data point.
Yep.
Explain the other data points, how you're fleshing them out.
Cool. So the next is team members. So I'm like, okay, the last business we had 400 team members.
400.
So I know what it looks like to have scale, but I also know what it looks like to have like reasonable scale within context, right? And I know what it looks like to have multi-countries because we were in 3 countries with the team. However, the lesson I learned there is like, I think I prefer having everybody in the office. So like one of the stances I'm going to take is we're not a remote environment.
Wow. Complete 100%.
No, we're not. And that's fine. And a lot of people are like, oh, you'll not get the talent. That's okay. Because the people who want to have the camaraderie, who get excited by learning and like, we've got some crazy ideas how to get here. Some of them I can't share right now. But I'm like, so for those people in the office environment, I want the high performance and the best, okay, and relative best. So I go, how do I get that? And so one of the things is I shared with you guys is like, in order to do this mission, I need to hire the best people. How do I hire the best people? I think you need to attract them. So I recently chatted to a guy, David Hyman from Lendy. Lendy's worth $1 billion. And he said, Frank, you need to have a talent bench. I said, I'm now interested. What is that? And he goes, a talent bench is, you can't put a job out and seek for you find your perfect person. The perfect person isn't looking for a job. They're already crushing it somewhere else. So who are the people on your bench, like you have a network that you can have access to when the right role comes up? And I was like, firstly, I need to go change my undies because that was sick. Secondly, all right, so now for me, I'm like, okay, how do I create a talent bench? And so the way I'm thinking about it is I want to document, so I'm doing this with my brother Jacques, I want to document the entire business journey and create like a docu-series on YouTube. So we're going to hire a full-time person for that process. Why? Because I want to attract talent. I want to share with them the vision that I'm on, the journey that I'm on, and use personal brand to be like, people like, okay, they've got some crazy things like, oh, I can't do remote work. But fuck, I reckon I could learn a lot from there. And then, it's like just posting something 2 days ago on LinkedIn, I was like, it's just downstairs. I was like, we're going to get started. I had 5 people apply for a job. One of them was like a person who's like, does businesses, takes them global. And he's like, when you're ready for your US expansion, go. And I was like, cool. What does it look like to supercharge that?
Wow.
So to answer your question, there's like, is the deficiency is there is I don't have a talent bench. I now talk to the right person to figure out I need that. How to build what is that? and now go and do it. I think the last element around, again, leverage of time is in order to get there, I believe, the mindset, which is the 1 to 10 million business, which is I'm the best at this role. And like, if you want something done right, do it yourself. I don't think that works at that scale. Yep. So at that scale, what's most important is when people walk in the room, your team members, your job as a leader is to inspire them, to give them vision, to give them direction. And then ultimately they should be far better at you at their particular discipline and be able to go and execute. So if you clearly articulated the vision and direction and then given them guardrails and try and help them throughout, you'll be able to do that on a bigger scale with more people. So like one of the things we've done is like, yesterday we sat down with our brand team. So like the previous business, we didn't have a brand team. We had a person internal, like, oh, just do a logo and this and that. I've gone, no, I want a pitch deck as one of the brand, like we've got like 10 different assets that can come from this. And the pitch deck was not for me to pitch to a venture capital. I want to be able to pitch to my team members so they know exactly the mission we're on, because hey, like we all need to be running at this in parallel at like a crazy direction. And I can't every time try and reimagine and re-articulate my mission and vision. Like I need you to know from day one, and when you leave here, you're like, fuck, let's go, right? So it's like what I believe needs to happen, and I say believe because like I haven't done it, right, guys? It's like what I believe needs to happen is like you need to create the right foundation so that we don't go back to certain elements. Certain things are going to be very organic and change, but the where we want to go and the outcome we want is going to be pretty rigid. And so therefore, like I don't need to go back and think about like, oh, how do I inspire the team? Like no, let's just do it here and then let's go.
Wow. Let's go.
Let's go.
I'm inspired. So, okay,
my job is done.
Still thinking.
Okay,
Just absorbing.
Starstruck.
I know that at the moment what you're working on is a little bit private, and I respect that. So what we're going to do is give our business as the example to work on. So you've got three options. You can either say how we could build a selling agent business to be $1 billion enterprise, a buyer's agency to be $1 billion, or, which I'd love to get your perspective, is how can the Bothsides brand, podcast, events, and real estate be $1 billion enterprise?
Yeah, cool.
From your perspective.
I want to jam on all three, boys. So let's start with both sides. Here's how I think it happens. I think what has to happen is you don't do that from Australia. In my opinion, the market is not big enough, and you can see that through the podcast charts. So the Australian business podcast space isn't championed by an Australian. Why? Because it's other people's audiences and other people's such great big impact that spills over into Australia. So like almost no one will be able to compete in the next like easy 5 years with Stephen Bartlett, even though he's not even in this country and he's done a tour twice. So I think first steps first is like you have to be able to expand that audience. And I think the obvious one for me is like America, right? You crack that, things start to jam. Now, why that's the cornerstone is because through that, what happens is you're going to be able to build a network. And building network creates leverage of time and ability to like, okay, when you're like, okay, now we're going to expand the real estate part to another country, you already know 20 people to call and they're going to be able to help you. Okay? So, stepping stone, the podcast, grow the audience. Next one is meet the people in the other country. After that goes, a lot of people in the podcasting game I see today in long form are going through this approach, which is I've gotten to an audience size, and once I get here, I can now go and advertise Whoop or something, or insert random business that doesn't make much like logical, strategic decision to what I'm doing. Cool, that's awesome, and enjoy the few $1,000s. Like no offense, like I'm not sorry, that sounds really offensive. I don't mean it like that, but I just mean like if you've got $1 billion mindset, the few thousand isn't going to get you there. Yeah. Fuck, now I sound like an asshole. Let's go. So what you need to do is you have that audience and you try and not monetize them for as long as possible because you need to build trust for as long as possible. And only once the moment happens when you have an opportunity to deliver them is a valuable opportunity when you have that exchange. It no longer feels like I'm selling you something because once something doesn't align strategically to you, there's a distinction between we're having a jam session with the boys and oh God, here we go. They're selling me that random thing again. Right? So only once you find the perfect thing for your audience, then you start riffing on that and adding it in. But in my opinion, that thing you need to own or own a stake in. So let me go like, where are my data points coming from, Frank? Stephen Bartlett, great example. From what my last understanding here is generating 30 million from Diary of a CEO. That's the top line. Like that means almost nothing. That's just from the advertisements. What is really interesting is in the advertisements he's done, most of them he owns a share in. So if you've ever seen a graph, there was Huel Protein 5 years ago. They did like 20 million pounds. 5 years later, they're doing 650 million pounds. And he gets to ride on that wave, which is like, I'm using my audience. The audience wants this product. The product, people are buying the product. The company is growing. And hey, also I own a share. Do you know what I mean? So that I think only through that do you then get to create $1 billion business. Pause for effect.
Do you think you can transition this and do conferences and then take that to America too? I shouldn't use the word have to because there's so many variations. There's so many pathways to success. There's no like straight line. I think conferences and things like that in person is a really smartly strategic move. Not because of the money you make each time. Now, some of them, again, Stephen Bartlett, I went to his most recent one, 5,000 people in Sydney, doing back to back. Cool, you're making great cash. But it's around the connection to the audience. So when you're in a different market that you're not there, like you want to make sure that you're kind of showing face and like getting people like they want to, the more influence you create, and I'm nowhere near this, but I'm just kind of reverse engineering it. People want to feel like they're related to you. It's kind of like when, you first start a business, everybody around you like wants to see you succeed. You get to a certain level and like we've had texts like this. It's like, don't forget who you are, Frank. And I was like, oh fuck, like it's not, I'm not trying to be mean. It's just like, there's lots of things to do and I've forgotten there's, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like by creating this place where people can come and you create a community and now people are wearing your merch because it's from the conference, like the brand builds and builds and builds, and you get to tell like a different story. So again, I saw Huberman when he came here, and the Huberman on the podcast compared to the Huberman in the conference is like, oh wow, that's super interesting because on it was very much like the human side of him and getting to see like this different world, and then you leave there like more of a raving fan.
And now I'm more inclined to listen. And now I'm more inclined to buy the things when you're selling the things when they're in the value exchange. Does that make sense?
So the things that you're going to sell with the value exchange, you've built a lot of brand equity and
Correct.
trust.
Yes.
Do you think that product or service we sell, we think of, or will organically happen?
I think that you can. Both can happen. I think. I take things as a really macro lens. So I've had, for my podcast, Chew the Fat, shout outs, boys. No. I've had people reach out and be like, hey, I want to do this. Hey, I want to do that. And I'm like, no, I'm good. And they're like, oh, and I've had other people like friends and family, my dad, bless him. He's like, Frank, you gotta start making money from it. No. Like, I'm playing 3D chess. This is a 10, 20 year game. So the longer I don't make money, the more trust I build. And so I'm just like, I don't really care, because something will come at some stage and the funnel is created. Now that I'm conscious, it's the position I'm in that I don't have to worry about monetizing it, because I'm like, this is a long game, and there's lots of benefits that come. So for the audience listening today, there's hopefully the benefit that they get to learn something, but from a person interviewing, the benefit is you get to make a network. And they go, like I said to before, like someone's offered me to come and run their business, be a CEO. Why? Because they heard me on a podcast. Like crazy. Do you know what I mean? So back to your point, do you need to create something or you'll find it? I think as long as you're testing in with the audience, over time it will come. But if you need to think about it, like go to the audience. And it's like, once you build trust, it's like, hey, what would you guys love to see? And then try and figure out from there where it comes. But the longer you have a time horizon, like Alex Hormozy has done this just brilliantly, right? Like he came in red hot and he was like, my podcast will never have ads, so this and that. My book, you want to buy it, you don't pay for it, you get postage. Why? Because he's like, where his end state is, he's created acquisition.com, and now he takes stakes in like what he's created is this huge funnel, and now he has 3,000 businesses apply to be part of acquisition.com. He invests in 4 of them a year, and that is where he's monetized it right at the tippy top, right at the end. And like he will just continue to crush.
Wow. With you now picking your product or service, what data, I know you've said you've got to understand America, building a team, leverage, all that. Are you thinking strategically with data points on creating your next product or service? Yeah,
for sure. Like, so the process has been like this. Myself and my brother Jacques, we're very aligned in terms of like a little bit like crazy in terms of like we like our love for business. Like we are nice guys. We are normal. We're not human robots, but sometimes we are. And so we were like, okay, we want to play in a space. And so we went through like, almost 12 sectors, and those sectors could be something as crazy as construction, we talked about it. The data points for me is like, I go through a process. So I've created a framework in the background, which is how can I tell I'm going to be inspired by this? Because the opportunity could be huge, but I need to make sure I'm going to be inspired that when times get tough, I'm not like, fuck it. I don't need that. Right? Yeah, exactly. So that's the first one. The next one is like, okay, who is playing that space? So who are the competitors? And if the competitors are ridiculous and they got heaps of cash and they're really great executors, like, okay, like I don't really have a right to play. Next from that is like, what's the market size and opportunity? So, I'm moving into a contracting opportunity or expanding opportunity. So for example, am I moving into a space that's like a trend or a fad? And the Google, because you can look at Google search trends, and are the Google search trends telling me that people are kind of over this curve, or they're expanding into this curve? So like if you play back a year and a half, anything with .ai in it, like you're just crushing. Like you're going to be raising capital left, right, and center. I think you're in this state where it's growing still exponentially. However, just randomly throw an AI in your name, you're probably not going to raise the capital that easily. So I'm looking at these different trends. And then finally, it's like, what are the gaps in the market that if I got these items, I can then go and there's a solid product in here, not a tit for tat product. And so what I mean by that is like, I'm not going to look at... let me think about something from a real estate perspective. I'm not going to look at Agent Box and then make the next CRM, and this one has a slight new feature or these 3 new features, because it's like, well, like, am I really creating that much value, or am I going to have to fight on the front lines to like just be the most like the best brand and the best inspirational salesperson? I don't want to play in that. Then finally, it's like, okay, cool. Who is in my network? So who is in my network that can assist me here? So back to this concept of leverage of time, we had this concept of we wanted to be a construction company. We saw a really interesting gap where people in the renovation space was mostly ones and twos, like a builder and then 2 of their mates, a builder and 4 of their mates. And they kind of get to this level and they stop. And we were like, okay, just in Northern Beaches alone, there was like, I think it was like a couple of $1 billion. And I was like, of real estate, sorry. And I was like, far out, that's crazy. But then what I did is instead of like going and testing the market and all that kind of stuff, I went, okay, who has played in that space? And I can just ask the question. And so I found a person through my network. He'd built a $50 million building company. I explained to him the idea. And he goes, the reason why there's no one playing in that space and your competitors are really easy to slaughter is, aggressive, is because there's not enough margin. He goes, as soon as you add head office costs, Frank, your margin is down to about 9%. And he goes, here's what you're not thinking about is building, you have a builder's warranty. And for 5 years, you're retaining that. So in year 1, in order to get to the numbers you want, you got to be delivering 100 jobs per year. And by year 5, you now have to remember you've got 500 jobs that you are liable for. He goes, now run your margins. And I was like, see you later, I'm not in construction. Right? So like I think the final data point for me is like, as someone's played in that space, I can save myself a lot of heartache by having an hour conversation.
What happens if it's a new type of business or new idea where no one's played in that space before? What do you do then?
Cool. Very good. So that becomes interesting, right? And a couple of these have gone there. The reality of like 2024 is like, there aren't that many new things. There's like creativity and permutations of the thing. We believe we found a new thing. But still within there are different competitors. I think the next data point for us to be like, okay, what is the skills shortage in order to get there? So something that's like truly new is like a new invention. And now we're like, okay, is that like an engineering problem solve? Like we were at a pitch night, we got invited as like a family office to invest into startups. And we had 12 startups. And 2 of them were crazy, like in terms of new. One was how do I explain this? It's essentially electricity shot from a beam to be able to then be caught by a drone. So when a drone is flying doing fields, at the moment they have to land, a battery has to be swapped out and they go back up. And if you do that at a macro sense, it's a lot of dollars that gets created. So they're shooting electricity from a beam to a drone and it can stay in the air in perpetuity.
It charges it.
Charges it, right? Now, like that's new.
Wow.
But what does new mean? That is a significant engineering, safety, regulation challenge that is going to cost you tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars to solve for. But if you do, oof, interesting.
Wow. I've got 2 questions.
Yep.
This is really good. Are you going to raise capital for your new enterprise?
Yep.
And 2, relating back to the real estate space, a lot of selling agents and buyers agents aren't creating a new product or service.
Totally.
They're just, like you said, trying to make a better brand, trying to cut on cost. Like, there's no difference. What advice would you give to an agent to...
Yeah, cool. Let's, so I'll just quickly answer the raising capital. Yes. Because I learned the discipline of what it looks like to squeeze your own dollars. Yeah. So I know how to spend money wisely, or relative, what I believe is wisely. And now I'm playing a new game. I've played levels 1 to 3 in business. I now need to play levels 4, 5, and 6. And in order to execute on our vision, what we want to do, I think it's going to take between $20 and $50 million worth of capital raised.
To invest in this initial phase?
Not from us, from outside external capital.
Would you advise us to do the same?
Let's come back to capital raise in a second, because I want to answer for the audience, because everybody might be on the edge of the seat or asleep, is this for agents. Here's what agents taught me incredibly well. The concept of dollar cost productivity was one of the most significant things in my business that I share out as advisory, and people's big minds explode. Because agents have done an incredible job of going like, there's activities that I do that if I do them all the time, I can make more money. Beautiful. There is another layer on top of that. So if you continually think about that concept, you can continually push up your ability to leverage your time. And so what I mean by that is like, one agent doing maximum leverage of the time, they can only get to so much dollars before, unless they're Alex Phillips, before it's like, I'm going to explode, right? And there's so many versions of that. So for me, I go, okay, and I had this, right? I was the sales team of 1. I was working on the $1 million deals, and then when we had a team of 400, I can't do that. But then I realized the leverage of my time is if I get incredibly good at the discipline of coaching to be able to articulate the problem of how to sell and create a framework and inspire the people across the table, I will get a far better leverage of my time. So what do I mean? So if you, an agent, let's say you're doing $2 million a year and you've really nailed down your dollar cost productivity. If you can hire 4 agents and focus the energy you have to create them to be more productive. Now, it's not an easy decision in the beginning. Like, I've gone through it. Like, there's a drop in productivity. But if you can become a good person at creating the factory of an incredible salesperson, what happens soon is now each one of them get up to $1 million. Okay, what's your time leverage? One person was doing 2. I have 4 people that do 1. Now, if I can help them each day be inspired by an extra, not each day compounding, but like I can help them at the end of 6 months or 1 year to be 10% more hungry, more excited, more efficient, feel that like I care about them. Okay, 10% across 4 $1 million writers is extra $400,000. Okay, that's not enough. So how do I do that across the board and have a team of absolute guns and weapons? Because that, if people can find that transition, which is a really scary transition, they can find the transition to realize that as a leader, as a person who wants to absolutely crush, if you have the ability to inspire people and help them grow to be the best versions of themselves, your leverage is so much more significant. So I'll boil it back down to my version today. One of the things I do is I advise businesses. And so I advise 7 different businesses, things as random as renewable energies to a buyer's agency to a fast growing tech company. And what I realized is in an hour, so some of these people I had a 2-hour conversation with, and I was able to really quickly figure out, okay, there's a gap here. And one, I'll give an example. They had 1,000 new customers come to their website every month. Of that, 400 churn, so they no longer pay after the next month, so they haven't been convinced. And so now you have 400 customers that could be convinced, but they're not. I said, what's your sales team? None. Perfect. Okay. So I found them a person who was an absolute gangster, placed that person. The first month, they made $40,000. So now my leverage of time is 2 hours to help your business with $40,000.
Wow.
Right? And so if then you go stack up that time and you do that every day. I do not celebrate I work lots of hours. At the moment I am, but everything is giving me intense energy, as obviously I'm freaking everybody out of here. But it's every moment is how can I maximize the leverage in that moment? I think if you shift that mindset and keep boiling it up from a dollar cost productivity standpoint, that's how you unlock.
So bringing it back to real estate, Kev hypothetically is writing 3 mil.
Yep.
The goal is to get to 30 or 50.
Yes.
How does he do it?
Great. So what Kev needs to figure out is, and what I'm doing today, how much of that is a process and a framework, and how much of that is the Kev magic. Okay. What I did, and this is what to you do, is I created what I call the Sales Academy. So because I was I'm good at sales, how do I articulate it to someone? So what I did is I created the framework of how we sell at Realbase. And that was based on principles like the psychological principles of selling, how we do a pitch, the presentation, because I knew that I couldn't keep telling the same thing over and over again because you get fatigued because you have someone that burn out, they drop off. You have someone that burn out, they drop off. And you're no one's even going to do it, I'm going to do it. So what you do is you in your best masterclass, you film all of these videos and you film and you break down what you're doing in the sales process and you create a framework. This is the both sides or the Kev magic of how to be the best salesperson you can be. Okay? Now, the next is you need to learn how to coach. So there's very different thing between, and I've seen the distinction between a business that has a rule with an iron fist, which is someone does something and you go, here's how you did that wrong. Okay, great. That's probably the most common. To Kev says to someone, they come out of the listing presentation and Kev goes, what's one thing do you reckon you could have done better? And the person goes, oh, I reckon I could have done this. You go, oh, that's awesome. What do you reckon the second thing is? I could have done this. And the third thing, and they go, I don't know. And you go, what if you did know? And they go, oh, probably this. Okay, why is that important? Because if I tell you in a rule with an iron fist, what's happening is it's me to you and it's not soaking into your brain. So where I learned this the most, I read a book called Coaching for Performance, and it was a tennis coach to a tennis player. And the version was when you ask the question right, you get the right response. So the tennis player hits the ball and you say, were you looking at the ball? And they go, yes. Great. They're always going to say that. The other way to ask the question is, when the ball was spinning, which way was it spinning? Okay. I need to make sure I look at the ball because next time he's going to ask me the same question and we're both looking at the same ball. So by asking the right question, what's going to happen is you're going to create a culture of interdependence rather than a culture of dependence. The problem I see is when people are in that leadership role and they're an incredible executor from a sales perspective, they do the tell you what to do. And soon you get this feeling of oh, I feel like I'm telling you the same thing over and over again. Why is it not sticking? And you change from this asking questions to get them to the answer. What happens is they soon come to you and they go, I know that when we talk, you're going to ask me a series of questions. So I've already pre-thought of those questions and I'm going to relay them back to you. And then you can overlay and add on. And soon I'm not dependent on asking you the question because I'm getting there myself. This is it's about a learning discipline that comes in. It's just like, think about it. It's like, how does the same coach Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, is like they got incredibly good at the process of coaching and getting the best out of a team. That to me is the only way you get to 20 mil, unless you're Alex Phillips and you crush it, right? But there's only one of them.
Yeah. When you said from working back from $1 billion, it's what you have to do differently and who you're going to become. Question for you. You didn't come from anything and you built yourself up to where you are now. What changed for you in yourself?
In the process of building a business? Oof, so much. So the fun part here is we get to talk from like this beautiful, beautiful place, hindsight, and I sound, you guys like, wow, he knows this stuff. I did not know my stuff. And I hope in 10 years I look back and go, oh, that's so cute. I was telling them like I knew my stuff, right? I didn't know what I was doing in so many respects and still don't, but like really like it was pretty heavy. So I'm talking about this approach about coaching and getting the best out of your team. My version of that was so bad. It was like, I would look at the time and if someone's 3 minutes late, I'd pull them up on that because everything was about, a minute cost me money, right? And like that is a great way to burn through a lot of people because you're not showing them like respect and you're questioning everything and they're like, I was working extra 3 minutes last night. Now we're in minute by minute process. So like I think the boil back to the question, the most important thing I learned was how to become a leader and how to inspire people through really caring about them. I think in the beginning, what I saw from other salespeople, and I was like, I don't have that magic, is people would come into the room and they would start talking like, hey, how was the game on the weekend? And the other person would be like really excited. I'm like, oh, they're like chumming out. And like, I was like, I don't know how to do that because I don't know sport. But then I learned like, actually everybody has a way to build rapport. You just have to be completely authentic to yourself. So for me, like I would walk into a sales meeting and my rapport wasn't built because I'm asking you about Susie Jane or something like that. My rapport is I'm going to help you really quickly execute on your problems in your business. And through the process of showing you how much I care about your business, we're going to build rapport, right? So leadership was absolutely one. The next one was around let's call it like emotional tolerance load. Every year in business you go through, a new challenge comes. And it's like, example for us, like year 5, we were about to lose our biggest customer, RT Edgar. And at that time, that was the world. And like me and my brothers are like, we've lost it. Like this business is going nowhere. And we were freaking out and it was really sad. And I remember that email like it was yesterday. But then the next year happens and something happens even bigger. And you'd like laugh back at that. And then the next year happens and it's like catastrophic in comparison. And you kind of soon realize then the same thing happens later and you're like, oh, that doesn't even flinch me. So your ability to load not only cognitive challenges, but emotional challenges becomes really, really strong. And so I think that's what, like, the thing I'm most passionate about in business is like, you got to stay in the game because you got to have that next piece of evidence that then tells you when the next problem comes, you're like, I've been through this. Now these days, I'm sure there's gonna be another challenge soon. And it's gonna be like, fuck, because every time feels different. But like, I have given myself enough stacks of evidence that I know that time changes things, and I know that I'll be through there. What else?
What were your routines in that point in time?
It changes so much. I think I'd say that's the biggest thing one of the bigger things that I've figured out now is like through the process of business, I thought about things as going through seasons. So some seasons I was behind my desk at 5 a.m. I would always leave at 6 p.m. because my brain just turns into absolute mush. But I would start really early. And like when you're in that season in the early days, I was like, this is going to be it for the rest of my life. And then you go through that period and it kind of normalizes. And so in those periods is where my routine just fell out the window. And so that's where, I've only trained twice this week. I haven't gone for a run for a few weeks. Where now, like I'm kind of back into a season where like my brain is waking me up. I don't advocate for this. I don't believe it at all, but it's just the way my brain is doing it at the moment. I've been waking up between 3 and 4 in the morning. So I'm behind my desk at like 4:02. Again, I don't advocate for that, but I know there's a season, but I'm still going to train. So I do 4 to 5. Then my son wakes up. He comes into the gym. My friend comes in. We train together 5 till 6, go for a run, come back, and now I'm back in. Because I now know if I want to continually execute at the best, I need to keep that strict the entire way through. It doesn't matter which season.
So if you went back in time, you would have done things differently with your fitness? Or do you think you needed to put in those hours?
Yeah, I think I needed to. I don't know if I do. I have some things that I'd change. I probably would, because like a couple of extra gains, you know, like I wouldn't be annoyed about that. And you know, and like would I have performed better? Like I think some of the stuff that fell by the wayside is like, you know, I went through periods of insomnia and all that kind of stuff. And I think if I had a bit more of a rigor and a routine, I reckon I could solve for it. But let's see, you know what I mean? Like, let's see. Like I'm super always conscious of this stuff, because it's like, again, you get that benefit of hindsight, but things will come and at a new scale and they'll feel completely differently. But I think, you know, like health and fitness for me is like, I am like pretty obsessed with it. So I can't see why I wouldn't change it, because it's like, you can figure it out to make it work. You know, people who are like, oh no, I just don't have the time. It's like, I don't know, for like 90% of the people, that's bullshit. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, I was most inspired by my eldest brother. Is like, we were in the thick of our business. He had a son. He lived in an apartment. He had all the excuses in the world not to train. And from the day 3 his son comes home, they figured out how to make a creche in their garage. It's not a fancy apartment. They just decided to prioritize the car out of there, put the couple of gym pieces of equipment. We were making like $800 a week, so we didn't have this benefit of cash. And he put his son there, and he would train, and every day, and like now his son's like 5, and he still does that because it's a priority. Right. So I think, you know, a lot of people say like, oh, I wish I had that luck, you know, that opportunity. It's like, if you truly prioritize it, you'll ruthlessly prioritize other things out of your life.
So on that topic then, what were maybe 3 or 2 or 1 things you would do to optimize productivity or do today?
What do I do today?
Besides V's.
Busted. I got to stop them, by the way. It's a new thing I started this week. Open up my bin, it's disturbing. Here's what I do today. Like I'm toying. I always like to toy around with things. Like my core things that are like I love is like my wife and my son. They're my everything. Business, health and fitness. And so in that space of health and fitness, I kind of play around because it keeps me excited. So, you know, I've tried the carnivore diet. I've tried vegan. You know, that's a bit of fun. No, it's not. No, yeah. Like trying these try these different things. And I kind of go like, okay, am I noticing an incremental energy gain? So my current thing is, you know, I saw someone post like 30 veggies a day and you feel better. I was like, yeah, come on, let's go. So yesterday, my dinner and my lunch, each one on the plate had like 17 vegetables. Like, it's just disturbing. There's a lot of vegetables. And so I'm trying that because I want to see, does that make a material impact? So I want to see what things can make an incremental gains. But all of that shit is kind of noise as long as you got the fundamentals. Do you go to sleep and try and get your 8 hours every night? So the thing that I do now, which is like the best investment ever, and this sounds like a shout outs to a business, but it kind of is because I want to celebrate the business, 8 sleep. You guys seen 8 sleep? So on all the podcasts, and the idea is it takes your heat at night and disperses it through this in your, let me start this again, that was terrible. On your mattress, you have a mattress topper, and it has all of these little pieces that push water behind you that you can't feel the water, and it disperses your heat. And what that means is, as a person that's sleeping, your different stages, deep, REM, and light, will vary depending on the heat your body is. And so your core temperature needs to be lowered in order to have the most optimal sleep. I purchased that at the time. It's like crazy expensive, $4,500, right? Someone would be like, that's crazy. I don't have the cash. Okay. But I went from sleeping, I always prioritize my 8 hours, but I went from sleeping, I track it on my Whoop, and my Whoop says you're awake 2 hours during the night that I can't remember. I bought that product, and I'm now only awake 1 hour or less. So you extrapolate it over my life, you gain an hour of sleep in perpetuity. Does that $4,000 sound like a lot? Not really, right? So that to me is like the pillar there is like sleep. You know, that's why I don't advocate hustle culture, because people are like, yeah, I did this and this, and they woke up at 3, went to bed at 11. I'm like, cool, like you're gonna die, right? It's like, so it's that, and then just like whole foods. So it might be vegan, might be this, might be that. Just make sure you're not eating shit. I think like everybody kind of gets that. Drink enough water and do some lifting, do some running. Do some like I think if you got all of that, like the marginal optimizations more just because it's fun for me, but like do those things, because if there's things there that you're missing, and most importantly is sleep, like game over at some stage, it's going to catch up with you.
When you were building Realbase, what was your biggest mistake, either in business or personal life, that you think hindered you from getting to that 180 mil exit sooner?
That's a good question. What was the biggest mistake?
Personal or business?
Yeah. I don't think there was...
If you had to say
no,
something.
no. It's good because when I think about that, I think about the thing I talked to you about before, which is like nothing. It's like cool. That helps no one in the audience. I think the mindset here is what's most important. Like if you fixate on mistakes, the problem is you're not then fixating on opportunity. So whenever I look back, I don't go, there are things that are mistakes. I go, I probably could have done that differently and quicker, which could have got me potentially to a different outcome. But the problem with people who fixate on mistakes and regrets is you don't know all the permutations that come off that. However, you asked the question, I want to help the audience. Here's one thing I would have done. Differently, and then I'll go to what you potentially could call a mistake. Differently as I would have built personal brand. I think if anybody's starting to a business today and they're not building personal brand, is missing out on the craziest opportunity of like our lifetime. It is so wild. I'm sure you guys know what this feeling like is right now. I was chatting to Dane Walker, a business called Rival, yesterday, and he said, I hope he doesn't mind me sharing, but he said, from launching the podcast, I've realized that it's made our business a couple $1 million. The podcast's been out for a year. Why is that? Well, he hasn't monetized. He doesn't have any ads. It's because the opportunity, you sit in the room with someone, that person, there's a potential relationship that comes, a network that's available, which then unlocked a revenue opportunity. Okay, crazy. Then apart from that is like his Instagram. And like it's same for me. It's like there are so many examples of, people get fixated on the numbers of their Instagram, of their Facebook, of their whatever, of their TikTok, where it doesn't really matter because 1,000 people in a room is a lot of people. And even if you're getting 1,000 views, there's so many other opportunities that come off it. So like come back all the way back to the start as I go, if I started my personal brand at year one, and the story wasn't like educating. The story is like, here's what I'm trying in my business. Hopefully it works. And I'm bringing people along for the journey. And then I was like, and then today I'm like, oh, that would be crazy. I think the trajectory would change. And so to answer your question, what's the mistake? My mistake was I held this on concept that I don't have Instagram as like a badge of honor. So people were like, oh, do you got an Instagram? And that was only 2 years ago. I don't have Instagram. And they go, and I go, no, I don't do Instagram. Like, I kiss my hand. You know what I mean? Like how good am I? Right? And like, that's really cool and really cute. But then the reality is like, what am I missing out on? So I've reshaped it to go like, okay, I don't consume Instagram, like, more than 10 minutes a day, maybe. It's often when I'm doing a number 2 and I'm thinking about my number 1 and I'm sending her memes, right? Like it's a very different way to consume it because I'm using the tool. I'm not letting the tool use me. And like, cause the algorithms are crazy, right? Like I downloaded TikTok once and I was like in a vortex for like 2 hours. I was like, whoa, delete, like as soon as like no, I'm not even gonna say that. You get me. So that would be the thing. I think it would be really interesting to see how the journey played out. The number might not have been different. The timeline might not have been different, but I reckon the opportunities on the other side would be different.
Now that you've downloaded Instagram,
yes,
do you get caught in the death scroll?
Never. But that's because I'm really intentional about it. So I try to be intentional about most things. And so like the longest death scroll for me is like 10 minutes. Like maximum, because I catch myself really, really quickly, and I mostly use it to go again send memes to my wife because it's hilarious, and then secondly it's to go like, what is a reaction video? What's something I can use from it? Like what's something I can learn from it? That's how I think about it, and those types of content I don't think people sitting in death scrolls going like, oh, I've just watched the 400th Elon Musk video, I'm so inspired. It's usually not that. It's usually like jokes and things and that kind of stuff. So, but sometimes you can feel it slipping, so you have to like intentionally bring it back. And that's where I talk about prioritization. When someone's like, I'm too busy for X, it's like, okay, what does your screen time look like?
When did your brain switch to just being intention-based 24/7? And does that ever get tiring?
Good, I like that. I think that has always been the case. So I think that there's like a in my DNA and nurture. So like if I think back to the kitchen days, when I was in that kitchen 60 hours a week, we didn't have breaks. So we would work 16-hour doubles. I remember some days I was falling behind, and I stayed in from the kitchen kind of closed at 11 until 2:30 a.m. filleting fish because I knew I had to get it for my partner next day. So I was already pretty focused. But where I tied it all back into my life is probably in the recent few years. And I think it's the more things you stack on, the more you ruthlessly prioritize. And then to your question, like, does it hinder things? When you're in a season, like I'm in a season right now, like my wife said to me 2 days ago, like, Frank, like we haven't hung out that much. I'm like, okay, cool. All right, good. Like, and like, it's but it's very rarely because I go like, I'm in the season, things are tough, but I started yesterday at 4. My last call was at 8. But I still made time to cook my wife and son dinner, clean up the kitchen, then got back into it. So it's still reasonably balanced. And I did that the whole time as the CEO of the business. I still came home and cooked them dinner.
How did you handle and manage your mental state when you were in that period of time where you were growing Realbase, but at the same time you didn't have the fitness routines in place to keep your mental state going? What did you do to sustain it? The context here is I have been training since I was 20. So I always had a bit of a slip. But to answer your question, how did I manage it? Terribly is the answer. Terribly. So there's periods in my life where I went, really deep down the rabbit hole in terms of like I had insomnia, I couldn't sleep for 3 days. And this is where I'm incredibly lucky to have such an amazing wife. My wife, Holly, shout out to Holly, she's a clinical psychologist. And so I'm really fortunate that some days, I was like literally losing my mind. I hadn't slept for 3 days. I'd be in bed from 8 p.m. until 6 a.m., but I couldn't sleep. It's because what was happening is I hadn't yet figured out, and luckily she helped me figure out that I was subconsciously processing stress and I wasn't consciously working through the stress. So I wasn't like, and this sounds really weird, so let me explain it to you. I have this thing where, for example, an email will get sent to me, I'll skim it, and then the next morning I open up, I haven't reread the email and I'll respond to it. Because obviously what's happening is like all of it's happening subconsciously. I'm processing that email. So before bed, I quickly go read all my emails. What a superpower. Go to bed. Oh, I'm asleep like a baby. And then that compounds. So like my role in the business as a CEO is like kind of your day is filled with shit. Mostly, like it's when the customers are escalating to you and now you got one of your biggest deals comes to you and goes, we're not happy. It's not often they come to you and like, hey, we're going to have a meeting just to let you know how great you are. You're such a great guy. We just want to let you know, right? So your day is filled with shit. And so I wasn't consciously kind of processing through that. So I thought a superpower of mine was not being stressed because I don't get the feeling of like anxiety and stuff like that. So I thought that was like this incredible thing that I had. And then I go through the insomnia bouts, couldn't figure it out. I wasn't self-aware enough to know what's going on. And then luckily my wife helped me work through it and go, you're really stressed. And I was like, no, I'm not. She's like, yeah, you are. and then helped me like unpack it. So like what was the learning there is like, I now do things to consciously bring thought into the front of my mind. So how do you do that?
Very good question. So like example, tomorrow I'll fly to Melbourne and then I have an hour in that space where I'm sitting on a plane. There's no internet. Amazing. I won't bring AirPods. I won't have my phone on because there's no reason for it. I won't bring an iPad. I won't do anything. I will have a notebook in front of me. I will write down, these are the plates I'm spinning today. These are the things that I believe are like big. I'll just sit there. And like what I'm trying to do is like surface the things that are hypothetically stressful onto a page. Then through that process of that, I start to notice like magic comes, like something will come in there and I'll add to that. And so it's essentially like the process of journaling, but in my own way. And what I'm trying to do is like get all the things I believe are the thoughts onto a page and then sit in the discomfort of doing nothing. We flew to Bali 3 weeks ago. And if anybody's seen this concept of raw dogging, right? Raw dogging is you sit and do nothing, you stare at a screen. And I was like, oh, big dog's going to raw dog today. And so I sat there. My wife's got, a couple of episodes lined up. My son, bless his little soul, he's asleep. And I'm just sitting there. And Holly's like starts chatting. I'm like, no, I'm raw dogging dog. And so I'm sitting there and I did nothing, no writing, no music, no nothing for 6 hours. And I came out, I was like, wow, that's really cool. But like, not for like, look at me, I'm so cool, but more cool because actually in our lives these days, like there's not really many minutes we don't have inputs coming in. Like it's constant. And like for me, it's like I train, and then if I go for a run, I got music in. Then you're making calls, and you're doing this, and you hang out with like my family, and but we're chatting. So there's constantly inputs. So I was like, it's probably been 10 years since I sat there for 6 hours. Maybe I've never done that in my life. I probably haven't. So like, but creating these little moments of just pure, there was a thing that Huberman talked about on the stage where Rick Rubin, like the master of creativity does, is he goes, body still, mind active. And so there's a practice I've been doing at the moment just to try it out. It's not like a daily discipline. It's like, it sounds so weird. Lay down on the ground, eyes closed, not trying to meditate, but having no inputs in and just let your mind be busy. So don't try and like steer the thoughts away from a meditative state. And it's crazy what I found is like doing stuff like that in these like 20, 30 minute increments I'll say to my wife, I'm busy, flat out working. She walks into the room, I'm laying down. She's like, come on, mate. Like, and it's like, let this happen. I find I get up and then I'm really energized. And why is that? I think it's because like you're constantly like pushing out dopamine all the time. And then for your first period there for 30 minutes, you didn't do anything. And your brain's like, I want dopamine. Like, let's go, let's crush. And like I think that's kind of what I'm like learning through that, to create these moments of still.
You're full of energy.
Nah.
Have you always been like that? And if so, why?
I am definitely full of energy. Yes. It freaks some people out. I've always been that way. So like I can remember like I was a fucking weird kid, right? So this is fun. I've never shared this story. So like I was like in year 7, I was 11 years old. I was like a bit young for year 7. And I was just like this crazy, like not the larrikin that was annoying in the classroom, but like I wanted to be an actor before I wanted to be a chef. So I had this moment in year 9. It was like a sliding doors moment where I could continue doing drama or I could continue my pathway to become a chef. And so I did food technology. And so I would just be like, I remember in year 7, I did like, there was the talent quest. I did a stand-up comedy show. Terrible, awful. When kids are sitting down, I'd walk behind them, sit down, slot myself in the back. It's like, how crazy is that? Like just like constantly zipping around, whipping around, just being weird. Like the reality is, I think there's like probably a little bit of ADHD there, but the good kind where you can follow a thought through, not where you like open up a million tabs, you're like and nothing happens, but the right amount. And so I think that's just like let's call that a gift, let's call that luck. There's definitely periods where I don't have that in terms of energy, and then it's a really stark contrast. Like if anybody knows me and then they see me in the other version, they're like, what is up, bro? And I'm like, and it happens few and far between, but that's why I've kind of become fixated on energy management to a degree. And so one of your questions before was like, what did you get wrong in those periods of time? Like I would then like drink on the weekends and do that kind of stuff. And that's when the energy just absolutely is like wiped. And it's like lame.
When did you stop drinking so often or regularly?
Last year, October. I think the reality is I was kind of doing the usual Australian thing, which is like we don't have a super healthy culture with drinking. I'm not coming here to advocate yes or no. Do what you like in terms of the audience. But I just realized every year I would always go through 2 months per year from like, as long as I can remember from when I started drinking, where I'd take a month and I wouldn't do any drinking. And what would happen is I kind of like look forward to that blowout at the end of that month. And like a blowout for me, just for context, isn't like a 3-day bender, like, but it's like, it's enough that it's going to make you not feel great on Sunday. And so what I found is like, I went through this continual cycle of like Monday, you're like not as good as you could be. By Friday, you're firing every cylinder, you knock yourself back and you kind of start the cycle again and again and again. And so then last October, I was like, I've kind of had enough of that. Let me give it a go just long term. And so I went an 8-month period of not doing it. And I was like, what's happening is it's a compound effect. So just like the compound of growth or of an asset, I'm compounding the momentum. So Friday hits, then the weekend comes. Now I'm super rested because I'm also trying to not do much work. And then Monday hits and I'm really energized. I'm compounding. And then so like my mind has just become more obsessed with the compounding effect of it. I kind of sound like I'm a bit boring as I talk to you guys. No, it's just, I just like, I'm obsessed with these things because I love business. Like I love business. I love riffing with 2 weeks ago, my brother and I, Fred Shubesta, Finder.com, business worth 650 mil. We're at his house, the crypto castle in wherever, in Coogee. And for 4.5 hours, we're sitting there talking like creatively about ideas and this, and we walk into town, we get an Asahi. So like the reverse of that is like a couple of beers with some mates, and like you get to have some bants. You're completely sober, go into town, have Asahi, and all we're doing is like creative thinking and jamming ideas. And I'm like, I just love the process of that. And I love the excitement and the enthusiasm that brings me. And then at the end of that, I sleep like a baby. And the next day I wake up, you know what I mean? Like I'm just kind of obsessed with the process because it's about it's like the camaraderie, all the cool shit that happens along the way where like some people might go like, oh, you're so focused because you want the cash because you like whatever. I'm like, yeah, that is definitely one part, but it's all the fun along the way. And I'm sure you guys know what that feels like.
You talked a bit about intentionality, process, etc. How do you set goals?
I'm as loose as a goose. so I this is how my brain works. I think about things from the more like add-ons and overlays I do, the more I'm going to forget them. So like, New Year's resolution time comes. If I have like 12 things, I'm going to forget them. If I just have one big thing that's like the anchor, that is usually good enough depending on what the goal is. So for my cookbook, Eat with Purpose, to raise $1 million for children's cancer, my anchor is I want to raise $1 million. And that's what was my starting position. I'm going to raise $1 million for Children's Cancer Institute. How cool is that? And then it's like, okay, what do I need to do in order to execute on that? And then does the thing I'm doing align strategically, and will it move me to that target quicker, faster, better? And if not, I know how to deprioritize it. And so like my goal setting is I always start with the big goal. Now, as you get to a business, you have to be a bit more bit clearer with that. So at Realbase, so I'll contextualize in our world and then help someone else. It's like at Realbase, we had 47% market share. We had an ambitious goal over the next 5 years. We want to get to 80%. Okay. So that's your top line. How do we get there? Well, we got 3 product lines and they have different varied levels of market share. 7%, 15%, 29%. Okay. So in order to get there, we need to get these up. Okay, how do we get them up? Okay, we need to increase sales. We need to increase product. And so it's like a cascading effect. By having the big top line one, the one that gets you super excited, you can then cascade down, and then the different teams can have their versions, but their versions always connect to the top. And so that's how I think, some people go through this, they don't have goals, and then they go from don't have goals to I'm going to just all of a sudden change to OKRs and have all these complex structures. The reality is those are going to go in the bin. So just start the process with making something really big, audacious, scary, and exciting, and continually remind yourself. So what I would do in a sales presentation, in a team meeting, in a town hall, I'd be like, guys, as you know, at Realbase, our mission is X. The goal in order to do that, and the only way we get there is by going this, and this, or celebrating a team win. It's hey, the product team have done an incredible job this week. They launched this feature, and I believe that feature is going to help us get to this. And so everything ties back to this goal. So it's really clear, but I don't have 1,000 of them.
So for example, now the new goal is $1 billion business.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the internal goal, and that's the internal goal. And the reason it's a number for me is because the only way to get to the number is you have to do a lot of things. So you only get to $1 billion business, in my opinion, to do it the right way, is you have to have a product that is incredibly valuable, right? You have to have a lot of people using your product. Okay, well now so from incredible value comes, I've got to build an amazing product, user experience, user interface. Have a lot of people use it. Okay, I've got to have an incredible marketing team and incredible sales team. So you can see how just from one top line goal, it's really obvious what the big drivers are. And again, these things will become clearer over time, but it's every time I go through one of these business decisions, if I sat down first and wrote my 45 goals, but then we just end up not doing that business, I've just wasted time. So it's start with something that's simple and straightforward, and then continue to kind of add as you're in the discipline and the rhythm of creating a goal.
So you mentioned before, the podcast is obviously helping personal brand and helping bring business opportunities, and that's what we're starting to have now. How do you decipher which ones you take, and how many do you take on?
Yes.
That's a good question.
Great question. Okay. How do I decide which ones to take? I think I have a bit of a framework, and so everything starts with that top line goal. So at the moment, why we're in this room, why do I have a podcast, why have I started using Instagram? It was really clear. I need to raise $1 million for Children's Cancer Institute because it's my opportunity to give back and showcase to the world. It's not about money. It's about everybody has discretionary effort, and I want to showcase through my effort, I can do something that's above and beyond my family.
So question just for the audience, where do you go to donate?
That's a great question, and it's going to be answered soon. It's eatwithpurpose.com. Or go to my Instagram, or go to the podcast. Shout outs. Here's the thing is, I knew that in order to raise $1 million, I went, okay, I got to create a product to do so, because I don't want to ask people for money, because how weird is that? I just sold this business. Can I have your money to give them? Weird, right? So I was like, I got to create a product, and I want to do a value exchange where people are amazing, I feel like I'm giving, but I'm getting something for it. So it's a new kind of giving, right? I will pay the costs. You buy the book, $99. Shout out. And so what I did is I went, okay, how do I get there? And I went through this pathway. I went, okay, publishers. I found out the publishers 20 cents on the dollar you get back. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. I'm not going to do all of this effort to get 20 cents on the dollar. No. So I went, okay, how have other people done it? So people like Prime, Better Beer, all these amazing influential brands build a product, and the product makes heaps of money. So I was like, I need to have a personal brand. And so that's what then fell out of that goal. Where did the start of this question come?
Deciding what opportunities.
Deciding what opportunities. So
and how many.
And how many. So coming back to the how do I decide, if I have that clear goal, I'm just continually asking myself the question, does this move towards my goal or not? And that's how I prioritize. So you know, there is examples of that where you might be like, Frank, what about if Holly wants to go to dinner? No, it doesn't go to my goal, right? Like, you know, obviously not. Like, but like, there's certain things like in my time per day, does that move it towards the goal? And if so, by how much? So here's the thing: the more opportunities, the more things that happen, you have to get really good at deciding which one to do. I'm really simple about it. I'm a simple guy. I go like this. I have like a framework in my mind. What is this new potential opportunity? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being nothing at all, 10 being amazing, how likely is this to make it? What's the impact to the goal? So for example, you know, coming on the Bothsides podcast, I'm like, that should be a really good opportunity to build a personal brand, which will come there. That is a 10 out of 10, boys. Okay. Oh, yeah. So great. What's the perceived effort? Okay, well, they're going to come here. I'm going to be in my lounge room. I'm going to walk from the kitchen to here, and I'm going to chat for a couple hours. I like chatting. The effort is 1 out of 10. Should I do that? Absolutely. Right? Then there's other things, which is like, you know, I've had examples where it's like you have got a PR person. They're like, oh, you can pay to be here, and then you can go fly to here to do this. And I'm like, okay, those things are. The outcome might be a 6. The effort required is a 9. That is now lower on my priority list. So I just think about things as what's the pathway to least resistance to get to my goal? And it's really straightforward. Now, I use that same framework in business. So you got to choose, you know, like for the people listening today, it's like, I want to hire another sales agent or another admin person or another this. It's like, okay, what is the effort that's required? What do you think the outcome that's going to happen? And then I do other things like what's the time and what are the dependencies? So time is really important because okay, I can do this. It's going to be a 10 out of 10. It's going to be a 1 out of 10, but it's going to take me 3 years. And you prioritize that, but there's quick wins down here, flip them over. Or the dependencies is like, in order to do this, I've got to talk to this person, run this, do that. I'm like, that's too much. Just like push that away. Does that make sense? So bring it all the way back home is like, that's how I think about prioritizing items. And then in terms of how do I stack, I sometimes stack too much. I'm a bit of a yes person sometimes. I'm trying to get better at that. Like I had a good example the other day. Oh God. So I had a person reach out to me on Instagram. You guys would get it all the time. Hey, love to buy your coffee. Firstly, anybody listening, if you're asking someone to buy them a coffee, you're telling them your hour's worth of time is worth $5.30. Don't offer it. Do you know what I mean? Like don't offer it. Just instead go, hey, yeah, can we catch up? Oh, here's a question. Like, yeah, anyway. So I thought one of my friends knew this person because I skim read the name. I do it often. And so here I am, I arrived to the cafe, and here's a completely random stranger I've never met in my entire life. And I'm like, oh no. And so then I'm having an hour conversation with this person. So like I do this a bit. I've had a few of those. It's like almost like weird speed dating. You guys had Josh from Hive on.
Yeah.
Josh reached out from Instagram. We had our first interaction was over lunch. And turns out he's an absolute legend, right? Like, so sometimes I'm like, oh no. And sometimes like, great. Well, how good's that? And so bring it back home. I'm sometimes really bad at this. Yeah. And so what I find is the more I stack on that are really big and meaty, the more I get to prioritize and kind of ruthlessly throw the rest. But it's also kind of organic in its approach. Does that help?
Yeah. Can I ask you one for our experience?
Yes.
Talking about prioritization, how do we know when to raise funds to build this $1 billion enterprise?
Love it. Okay, so here's the question. The way I would look at this is I would first ask a series of questions, which is how much money do I have in the bank today? How much money am I spending? Are we in a state of profitability? And now, do you want to get serious, or do you want to just like hypothetically lay it out?
Serious.
Great. All right, cool. So that's the first part, and the reason I ask that part is because if we have enough cash in bank and we have a positive cash flow, the next question is, okay, with that positive cash flow, what impact can I make? So, for example, I go, let's say I'm making 20 extra grand per month positively. I would say, with that 20 extra grand, how can I then make it that I can create again more positive cash flow? So I always think about it for business. I go, the reality is revenue solves problems. You have revenue profitability. So I go, can I use the money I make to make some more money? Because every month that you hold on, your valuation increases, and therefore the less you give up and the better terms you can set on your raising capital, right? And so I'm always trying to stress out, like, how much impact can I make on my own before I have to go an external. And so sometimes you'll make decisions that at the time you're like, oh, that's really going to stretch me. So we had examples where we're like, we're going to move from a factory that costs us 60 grand to next year's 250 grand. And by not getting capital for it, but by doing it ourselves, you kind of put on this burden and a bit of risk there, but then that pushes you to go harder and pushes you to prioritize what matters, which for us was more revenue. So once you get to like capped of that and you're like, okay, we can't because, let's say the income generated is purely from a podcast, we're not yet monetizing it. I would then go, before I go to capital raise, what can I do that gives me a similar effect to capital raising, but is done in a different way? So here's what I mean. What's the value I can create for someone else, but in return, I can get value from them? So I'll jump between both a real estate office and you guys. For you guys, it'd be like, okay, you have an audience which is valuable to someone. Now, not to the sake that you want to go and like monetize it immediately, but let's say there was someone that could be on the podcast that then is really well connected to other VCs. Or let's say there's someone on the podcast who's really well connected to something else you want, and they're building personal brand. And so you go, hey, like, love to have you on the podcast. So I think about this structurally from Chew the Fat as I go, I had a person reach out yesterday, hey, I'd love to be on the podcast. Okay, great. There's something on value that I can give you. And I was like, okay, you have a good story to tell for the audience perspective, but I can also see you're a chairperson of 3 really impressive multi-billion-dollar companies in Australia. Okay, what do I want to be? Okay, you make perfect sense to go and have a conversation, and we both get a value exchange, and that's going to help me. So it's not always like raise capital buys you things. It's like there are ways to creatively do it that can get you close to the outcome. Again, the closer to the outcome you get, the better your capital raise becomes. So I'm trying to get like really specific with you guys. What would you do with the capital?
We reinvest it to grow harder.
Okay, cool. And what would you reinvest for?
I'd probably grow the podcast more by going overseas and doing international tours throughout America and New Zealand.
Great. Okay. So here is what I go. Is I go like, okay, the net cost of that is we're flying internationally, and we're going to get a bunch of guests. Now, reality of that is the cost of flights. I'm putting you guys in economy for this conversation, all right?
Yes.
Because we want to extend your cash.
All right.
I went to the US this year in economy, hey?
What?
Yeah, that's right. Because it's about
raw dog.
Yeah, raw dogging. No, it was not raw dogging. Kai, my videographer, was like, "Can you shut the fuck up? I don't want to hear about business anymore. We've been on this plane for 17 hours." Anyway, because I want to make the money extend and push you through it. Like raising capital, then go spend it frivolously doesn't make sense. So I'd go, okay, how can I compress that to be as like tight the amount of time as possible? Because if you can do, like, we did a 10-day trip, we had, I think, 25 guests lined up. So it's just bam, bam, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Because now the cost is 2 flights or 3 flights or 4 flights. I'm not sure the number. And just maximum amount of people you can do there. And the cost to either hire studios. Now, this is where I get creative, right? Like, so today we're in my place. That's what I did with my guests. I went, okay, you've got a great place. Let's just shoot there because it's convenient for you, because I'm selling them that it's convenient for them. Hey, it also cost me way less money because some of the guests didn't want to do that. And so now I'm spending $500 on a studio. You guys know the cost. It's not cheap. And that compounds and stacks up. So you got it, like, if you can think about it from a creative lens, and then you go like, what's the minimum amount we can spend to make the maximum impact? I then look at that number and I go, okay, now we're talking, let's say it's 30 grand, because we're not going there to have like a great old time. We're going there specifically to do this. Then for the next one, you go, okay, we've proven the concept. Because when someone wants to when someone's putting money in, they got like, it's a very simple equation for them. They go, I can take this, let's say it's the 100 grand you're going to raise. I can take this 100 grand and put it in the bank and I'm going to get 5% on my money. Or I can take the 100 grand and put it on a debt fund. So debt funds when they can lend it out for a mortgage, and I can get 9% in the current environment. Or I give it to you guys. Now I need it to be a bigger percentage because I'm taking more risk. Now you have to prove to them by giving me this 100 grand, here's the impact I'm going to create. Without the data, how can I prove to them? So it's like you stretch yourself to do the first round yourself, you prove the concept, then you can ask for someone the next round. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
What else? What haven't I answered in that question? What else can I help you with live?
No. What else would you be doing in terms of next steps for us? What other activities would you foresee as being the most priority for us to get that billion?
Yeah, so here's where I think about long form content really different to most, and hopefully I'm not losing a bunch of like agents. So like that's not helpful for me. Still stay with me, team, because you should be doing this in your business. A lot of people are focused around the numbers when it comes to podcasts, when it comes to their Instagram, when it comes to their YouTube, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? It's like the number of people watching, and you guys know the game. Like you've done a really good job in a short period of time. There is a lot of people who like, it's like you're getting 100 people and like 79 of them are like your mum, right? But that's because you're only looking through the lens of one metric, and the metric is number of people watching. So it's the same with an agent, sharing interesting content about their world, their properties, and they're only getting a small number of people, and they soon miss out on the activity. But you forget that 10 years ago you were doing the reps, which was the phone calls. You kept getting no's and no's and no's and no's, and only through time did you build the reps to the where you can pick up the phone and close the deal, and you built a relationship. So you have to take that long-term view. But here's what people think about wrong when it comes to this kind of medium. I think about it from the lens of a guest experience. So I see people get really fixated on the thumbnail. What is it going to look like to the audience? What's this? What's that? Great. That's awesome. Do that. But what is the experience of the guest? Because they're going to create way more leverage than anything. So if you have an amazing experience where the guest leaves you and goes, that was the best experience I've ever had in my life, what are they going to remember? And when you come back to ask them like, hey, who's one person you know? They're going to tell you someone. And so through this concept of you focus on them, you will get a compound return. So like, it wasn't by accident that I cook for my guests, because I'm trying to create like a psychological dynamic that happens. They come to my home, so I'm inviting them to my home. This again, it gets weird, but this kind of lets you know the detail. Kai knows to keep the curtains open because I want them to be like, oh wow. And then he closes the curtains. We then sit down at the countertop there where I feed them. So I'm giving them food. So what am I trying to do? I'm trying to break bread, and I'm showing, they might see that top line number and be like, Frank's got all this money. They see the Lambo in the driveway, like, oh, what kind of person he's going to be? And now I'm in service to you. I'm feeding you. I'm sharing a meal, and my goal is it's the best meal you've ever had. And now the start of the conversation is like, I'm like, oh, wow. Because what am I trying to do? If I create the most amazing experience, I know I'm going to get the best conversation out of you. And then that conversation can be unique to the audience. And that's the compound effect. Now, let me bring it home for the people listening today. People talk about this concept in business, which is like, the customer experience. But like, are you really thinking about it? Like, this is where I think about the 1%ers matter. It's the psychological elements that people don't think about, the subliminal messages you send. So, for example, when we do, when I train my sales team, when they do like online virtual Zoom demos, I would train them like, you have to not have tabs open in your browser. You can't have things on your desktop. Why? That's so random, Frank. Well, because you're trying to tell a story about our business through not using words. If you have all these things open, you look chaotic. Is your mind crisp and clear? Are you there with me? Moving on from that, I'm in the listing presentation. Like, obviously running late seems really obvious, right? But what else are the things from a guest experience? It's like, for me, it was like, I would write down when we were having a conversation with someone, I'd furiously take notes. So the next time I met them, because again, like I told you guys, I didn't say like, how's Susie Joe, how's the kids? Because that wasn't it wasn't authentic to me to ask those questions. I'd be like, the last time we chatted, some of the challenges in your business was this, and this. I just want to check in, like, are those still the challenges you're having, or have you started to solve for? And they're like, fucking hell, like I told you that a year and a half ago. Or sometimes like, I told you that 4 years ago. Next was, when a person hit our website, or for a real estate agent, as a person calls your office or sends you a text, what's the time between them doing that and you calling them? So there's a Harvard study done that if you can answer that within 5 minutes, you have an 86% likelihood of converting. So what did I do? My sales team, we have an inbound lead come in. They have a notification that gets sent to their phone. We set up an integration. The game is, can you call them while they're still on the website? These are the psychological things that are happening where, what is that telling you about my company? It's telling you that we are fast. We are efficient. I don't now need to go and tell you that because I've shown you through our actions. And so that's what I think about when I think about guest experience or customer experience. It's all the little pieces that are like subliminally, like in your subconsciously happening, not necessarily in the forefront. Mic drop.
Mike fucking drop. That was the best. That was for me the best bit. I'm
not sure if I'm offended or like that. Nah, jokes.
So essentially, hypothetically speaking, we nailed the guest experience.
Yes.
Which would take time. What would be our next step from there?
Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. Like, the guest experience is a continual evolution. So it's like what happens post. So I've been on a few podcasts, and I kind of want to always bring it back to the audience because people are like, oh, I'm not starting a podcast. But I'll stay with podcasts for a second, then I'll bring it back. I've been on a few podcasts where you come there, the person, they feel very, connected in the moment, and then you never hear from them again, which is fine. Like, that's totally cool. What do? I'm like, I have since getting Grant Hackett on, I've caught up with him 5 times. I flew to Melbourne the other day to go just have lunch with him, and I got back on a plane and I flew home. Right? Like, so what am I showcasing to that person? It's like, no, I truly care because he's a fucking legend, right? I truly care. And I don't do that to everybody, right? Because some people you don't have immediate connection with. And so then you're kind of being inauthentic, but there's some people that I do. And a lot of them. And so I think about my diary and my week in terms of work. Fred Shubester was on my podcast. That's how I got to know Fred Shubester. Now I'm in his house for 5 hours, right? And like me and Fred caught up once every 2 weeks for like 3 months. Because that is, to your point, like, so the guest experience happens over the long term, because I'm thinking of from a macro experience. So back to real estate is like, how are you truly nurturing those people? And I think about, when I say those people, I think about who's your raving fan base. So most real estate agents will have this concept, which is the database comes, touch base with them, send them a text, awesome. But who are the ones that create maximum leverage and influence that should be far more effort and energy goes into it? And I'm talking about those are the ones that you're going to lunch with, you're becoming friends with. This year I went to the Bali Time Chamber. If you guys saw that on your Instagram, it's like the boys training in the mountains kind of vibe. And I went, amazing, incredible. And so it was the first 7 days of the year, and I went with Matt Nicastri. And Matt Nicastri, my friendship started with him as a client. I took him to lunch, right? But then it becomes like a real friendship. Now take that away from me, just go like, there are people always in sales, in business, that I think are, they can refer ones and twos, but there are people with real influence. And like, how are you trying to have really long-term relationships with them? Because I saw business in my space as I had a wallpaper on my screen, and it had logos of all the real estate offices, and the logo size changed depending on what I thought their influence was and what their ability to help me get other businesses were. So I disproportionately spent time with them and did things that were completely unscalable. Example, they call me up on 6 p.m. on a Friday. Frank, if you can get me a signboard here, I'll like a signboard for this property because my vendor's freaking out, I'll think about changing for you. I would personally go and drive and do it. And the scale of the business is already kind of big enough. Another version, LJ Hooker Atlas. Atlas, LJ Hooker, right? Atlas, shout outs. We had a moment there where Michael Coombs was selling a $35 million property. At this scale, our business was already $4 or $5 million a year. I kind of was already wearing the CEO hat. And I had a person say to me, it was their biggest property that Michael Coombs had ever sold, 35 mil. It was fucking crazy. And I had one of my team members go, can I try and I'll show you. And they went, I'm not going today. And I went, what do you mean? Like, this is the biggest thing ever. It's like, nah. And because he kind of went like, you can't do this without me, right? And I went, okay, cool, no worries. Now, I could have called the client, but I knew the repercussions it's going to have for them and the whole business. So I went, and for the first shoot, and I'm going to show you this one, it's gangster. It's 35 Iluka Street. I remember I took the gimbal, I did all this, I ate the humble pie, I'm the CEO, whatever, and I'm shooting his house. I have no idea how to do it. The end result was great, but I did it because it's like, you do be prepared to do shit that is just crazy, because people can see your dedication to the mission and like truly feel it and know like, oh shit, you're doing that, but you're also like to run this company. That's the shit that compounds, and that's the guest experience. And those are the raving fans you create. And raving fans is then when it's not ones and twos with referrals. Like my example of that is like John Cunningham's from Cunningham's. Like, he helped me get like probably multi-millions of dollars worth of business. So like the lifetime value of the customer is not the 70 grand. Like, if I can truly make you like, we are tight and the same, we're a partnership, and I'm showcasing value consistently to you, it's going to just pay off over time.
You think in a very strategic way.
Always.
Was it a mentor that taught you how to think like this? Was it life experiences?
I didn't, because we didn't have anybody. We just had the brothers. It was definitely I like, the term people throw around is like digital mentor. So I would just kind of piece together the content that felt right to me, so that whether that content be sales, and so like I read like the 10x rule by Grant Cardone. So you've heard me talk about the big audacious goal. That was the one nugget I got out of the book. Then you hear me talk about like leadership, and it's like I read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. Then you hear me talk about the psychological principles. So for me, I was like, sales, that makes sense, but like, how can I do it better? And so then I read Influence by Robert Cialdini. So it's just like everything I'm saying is like, actually, there's nothing unique. It's just like an amalgamation of everything that resonated with me from a content perspective. And then through the process of reflecting, I've created like the map and the framework. So, before I talk about the pathway of least resistance and that, and like my brain didn't go like, this is it, let's create a framework. It was like, I was doing these things, it was growing. And then I sit back and I reflect, I go, okay, how can I articulate this to someone to help them? Like I said, I advised 7 businesses, and I'm like, the only way I can help you is if I can better articulate what I'm saying. And therefore I need to kind of look retrospectively and go like, what is it that I'm doing? And how can I pass this information to someone else? And so realistically, I don't have any like mentors. I did have 2 incredible brothers that they were a shining light to me in terms of like their hard work and discipline and dedication. Like, if I put you in the room with my eldest brother, Ken, or my middle brother, Jacques, you'll kind of get a sense, okay, this is just like, there's something that's inbred there, and a lot has come from them. Because like Jacques, as an example, we've I think it's a couple months ago, we ran 60Ks together. 2 weeks he's running 80Ks, did a marathon last week. It's like, that's what he's doing. Ken, he's like, he hasn't missed a day of the gym since he was 14, right? Like, it's just like, like, and so it's like, those would be my biggest influence in my life, is because I'm standing side by side with these people that were all just pointing towards the mission.
Man, that's phenomenal. I really appreciate your time, and just in respect to that, we'll wrap it up now.
No dramas.
My last question for you is, what is your favorite question to ask on your podcast?
Again, like back to like the psychological principles, what I love to do is I love to create the balance between, and I'm not saying this as like an educational piece, but just like sharing the question. I love to create the balance between let's call it the robot, which I have just showcased to you guys, of business, and the reality of life. So, my first question over the meal is like, take me back to the strongest experience you've ever had with food. Like, where are we? And so I'm trying to get into that person's mind to like really, and it's like, they're like, oh, I'm with my grandma picking a raspberry. I'm like, fuck, that's cool. You know what I mean? And so and then in the next part of the interview, it's like, like, bring me to the key things that shaped your childhood. And then I finish always with like, let's reflect. We're sitting on a couch, we're sipping a warm tea. You've had an incredible life. Like, what have you done? And so trying to get like, because I am so passionate that like business is so much, but we're humans. I'm trying to like humanize the businessoid robot man, and just to kind of like round it out. And so I love that, because there's something special when you see like that twinkle in the eye, or ask someone, the high performance dilemma, the entrepreneur's dilemma is often like next, and they like never reflect. And sometimes I get people like reflecting on that moment, and you see like a tear in their eye, and you're like, fuck, there was something special there. And so that's my jam.
So what was that meal for yourself that brought the most?
Yep, got it. Boom. I don't like, see, that's the thing. Some of these things are like so powerful, they're just in mind. I wanted to be a chef so bad that and like, bless my parents, like shout outs to them. They want to support me in that journey. And so there was a moment when I was like 16 where I saved up my pocket money because I'd been working jobs. I got on a plane to see my auntie Marianne. And for a week we did nothing, but she was like going to teach me how to cook. And she made this recipe, a deboned chicken. She showed me how to debone the chicken, and made a lemon and thyme stuffing. And I've made that every Christmas since the day she showed me. It's like a crowd favorite in here, and I make it every year. And like, I can remember the smell of the wood and the smell of the thyme and the lemon. And I was like, this is just genius. And that's it.
Deboned chicken. Frank Greef, thank you very much.
My last question for you, Frank. If you were to give yourself, from the outside looking into your life, if you were to give yourself one piece of advice right now, it doesn't have to be because something's bad, but what would be your one piece of advice to yourself right now?
That's a good question. I like that. Well done. Thank you. I think it's something I actually have to tell myself frequently. It's the battle between You know, like today I've obviously like showcased like I'm confidently making these decisions, but then it's the reality of like when you're in that, you know, like, so like I frequently do it. Like I open up the numbers, whether it be like the social game, how it's tracking, or like the, you know, where I'm tracking towards goals, and I'm like, oh man, I just want it now. And then I have to say to myself, like, just stay the course. Like, you know it's about the reps and the time that you're in the game. Like, stay the course. You haven't perfectly seen the course and where it's going to land, but you know if you're doing the right activities, you're going to get there. It's just a matter of time, and it doesn't matter because the process is so fun. That's what I say.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Boom.
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 Thank you.
Nice, boys.